Welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, also known as Wolf, and here with me is Tony and Anthony, two different people. For some reason, sometimes people think y'all are the same person.
Yeah, I still don't know how, like, at this point, it's just not, like, in people's minds that these are two separate human beings.
I can tell you exactly why.
I mean, like, it would be one thing if you never saw us in the same room, you know?
I mean, y'all are both not attractive. You're both very, I mean, I guess to me, your voices are annoying, kind of like nails on a chalkboard.
Well, see, that really speaks bad. It speaks worse for you than it does for us, because that means you're a terrible judge of character. You keep ugly, stupid people around you.
Well, you have
so what does it say about you?
You have to have people to do the menial tasks.
Now, see, if you were smart, you would have good-looking, capable people around you. You wouldn't keep idiots around you.
I don't want two good-looking co-hosts that can outshine me.
Well, if you're so good-looking, then nobody can outshine you.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to.
Your logic is falling apart here, and you're trying to squirm your way out of it. You painted yourself into a corner.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I didn't say okay. Yeah. That's how you said it. You say all kinds of weird things, and you say them incorrectly.
So it's probably a bad idea that you have me on a podcast, but yet here I am.
I'm gonna need the violence to stop. Okay.
I'm just having fun, folks. I'm just messing around. They're not attractive, but they are good people. Okay. So here's what I'm going to say. We left you last week on last Tuesday, kind of on a cliffhanger, and we debated about putting it on YouTube to finish it up. But then we thought, no, because that would be unfair to the people who only listen to us on the podcast and refuse to go to YouTube, which, I used to think, well, those people need to get with the program. But now I'm starting to feel sympathy for them and just thinking maybe we should just do it all on the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know. We vacillate back and forth between whether or not we should do it this way or that, whatever, because we want to try to mitigate the problems that come with certain platforms. And anyways, here we are. Don't forget to join Paranormal Roundtable group. Lots of cool stuff that gets told there. We also have a Paranormal Roundtable prayer group. We have a Paranormal Roundtable holistic healing group. We have Paranormal Roundtable. We have PRT News. We have all kinds of different stuff going on with Paranormal Roundtable. And don't forget to check out our merch on the clothing store. And we forgot to advertise last Tuesday, but I'm going to tell you right now, please go to Rumble and subscribe to Paranormal Roundtable on Rumble. We're on Rumble on Thursdays. And then also, don't forget to like and subscribe this episode and last week's episode. And don't forget to hit the notification bell, so you can get your notifications, so you know that when we've made a show, so you can show up. And last but not least, Paranormal Soundtable. Please go to Paranormal Soundtable. That's our music label. Nellie's writing music, and it's really good. Go check it out. The Bear King, I think it's well over 20,000 hits now.
Yeah, everybody likes that song.
That song is pretty amazing. And so, yeah, go check out Paranormal Soundtable. That being said, we have a Patreon. If you want to help support the show, it's the best way to support the show because you get something out of it. $10, $20, $30, $40, and $50 tier. And each tier gives you better, bigger swag bag. $10, you get an autograph book from one of many authors. $20 tier, you get, and of course you get some stickers and some other things. $20 tier, you get all that, plus you get like a hat, right?
Yeah.
$30 tier, you get that, a shirt, and then you get 2 books. $40 tier, you get the 2 books and one of my books and everything else. $50 tier, you get both of my books, 2 more other books, and then all that other stuff. So it's a really good deal, and you really can help support the show that way and help us keep going because the donations are a way to help support the show on YouTube. But, people, not everybody can afford to help and donate and whatever. We understand the economy and money's tight and yada, yada, yada. So if you want to donate to us to help the show, you can just go through the PayPal. We have the link on the show. Just go directly to the PayPal and you can make a donation there. And so, yeah, there's different ways to help out with the show because we're committed to keeping it from behind a paywall. We don't want to put it behind a paywall ever. And it's been 5 years. And, yeah. So it's funny when I see people's comments and they're like, I quit listening to Paranormal Roundtable 7 years ago. Well, that must have been in an alternate timeline. Definitely the Mandela effect was involved because we weren't around 7 years ago. So, yeah, I don't know what channel you...
Let me borrow your time machine. I have some lottery numbers here.
So I don't know what reality you're in, but you were blown off course somewhere. Something happened. But yeah, so those are different ways to help support the show. And also we have memberships, but the memberships, we don't, like I said, we don't put anything behind a paywall. There's no members only content like a lot of these channels do. Not knocking them. If they do it, they do it. That's their way to make, revenue to help keep the show going. That's how they do it. What we do with that is we enter you into a drawing every Sunday where you can win PRT swag. And we do 3, sometimes 4, or even 5 people we choose to give away, and we mail off every 2 weeks. And so, yeah, if you're interested in that, and then of course the Patreon, you'll get your stuff, and we do these giveaways pretty regularly. So that being said, we're going to get started here. Where did we leave off last week? We were talking with a guy named Jeff, who gave us some amazing information about a house he was living in out in the country in California, but there were these females that he was living with, 2 in particular, one named Stephanie and the other one was a Middle Eastern girl who we're not going to say her name, and we're not even going to give her a pseudonym. I'm not even going to whatever. We're just going to say, whatever, that person. There were some parties and some things that were going on. Just to recap real quick, in case you were not listening to last week's episode, you need to go back and listen to it. He was having some issues in this house, and there was this woman that was a self-proclaimed witch / necromancer, and she had a friend who was doing the same thing, and they were hunting down different types of books. They were into Crowley magic, Enochian magic. They were doing Kabbalic magic. They were into the Zohar. They were into all kinds of different things, reading, even different types of like the Hadiths, from the Quran and different, whatever they could get their hands on. She had a grimoire, I think he said, from the 15th century that was written in deer's blood. I mean, there was a lot of weird stuff that was going on. And then they got into a book, which we have warned people about. We're not going to say the name of it. We did say it once on the YouTube channel, but you're going to have to go back and try to find it, but I'm not going to say it. And that book is supposedly, the magic in it is protected by elves. Now, that's very telling, considering that in the Middle East, they just say jinn. They rarely, if ever, will allude to what these beings are specifically, other than the jinn. But they actually make a distinction. They say that these are dark elves that guard this book. And that, the original book, bound in human flesh, supposedly, the first one or whatever. And it's crazy. It's written in blood. There's all this crazy stuff attached to it. It was the inspiration for the mythical Necronomicon from H.P. Lovecraft. But if you look at H.P. Lovecraft, I'll just say this for a second here. A lot of what he talks about, these Hebraic and Arabic demons from the Levant, they correspond to real beings that are known throughout history, from the Mesopotamian deities to the Sumerian, the Babylonian, the Persian.
Yeah, they have stories of these elder deities called the Old Ones, and that correspond. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft, that's like the basis of his work right there.
Yeah, and so whenever you go down the rabbit hole, of course, the forbidden quarter or the forbidden zone, or the what they call the no man's zone, that sits between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. It's really that region of the desert is known as an uninhabitable place, but it is also the home of a creature that was supposedly very Cthulhu-like.
Yeah.
And then of course the lost city of Iram is there, which was built by giants, inhabited by giants. And of course one of the seven towers of Satan is supposedly there. That's where these demonic entities were kept, they were locked up there. Some have speculated that it was giants keeping reptilians, because of the war between them two. We're not going to get into all that, but these people, let's put it this way, they were into a lot of this stuff, and Jeff and I had pretty in-depth conversations about these things because he learned about it from researching it into what these people were doing and what they were messing with and what they were summoning, some of which was being seen by him. He was catching glimpses of it, but it got way worse, way more worse than you could imagine for this poor guy. And I'm not going to even talk about all of it because some of it's too, we can't discuss it on YouTube, okay? I might do a Rumble episode where I get into some of the darker aspects of the things that happened to him, but I'm not going to discuss it here or on the podcast. But let's put it this way. He was being sucked into this sort of, I don't want to call it a cult because it wasn't that organized, but it was like a coven, and they were doing things, and they were doing a lot of drugs, and he was eventually kind of bullied and cajoled into participating, and not willingly. His friend Steve had left, and that was this woman, Stephanie, that he was living with. That was her boyfriend, which was his best friend. And I asked him, I said, Jeff, why didn't you leave too? And he said, I was afraid. I was terrified. I didn't know what would happen to me if I tried to leave. He's like, when I had stayed on the couch for a couple of days at my friend's apartment, and then the girl that I was dating, I was seeing things, and then these things were starting to mess with, and they were manifesting in these people's homes. And so he said, part of me didn't want to bring it to anyone. Now, the thing about Jeff is his mother had MS. She wasn't in good health, and his dad had died when he was really young. I think he said he died like in an oil rig accident or something. I believe that's what he had said. But it was his mother, like she couldn't really do much to help him, and she died while he was living in this house. And so that had that had a profound effect. It was another blow to him and to his psyche. He hit sort of a downward spiral. His brother had gone to prison around the same time when all this was going on. So he really didn't have any family to confide in. He had an aunt and uncle that lived down in Bakersfield, but they didn't really communicate a whole lot. So he did take a trip down there to stay with them for like a few days to clear his mind and try to get away from these people. And then when he was, I think he said he was in Victorville or something like that, somebody ran him off the road and he nearly died. And when he looked into the other person's vehicle, he saw what looked like, and this is going to sound weird, but like he's like, have you ever seen like a mummy, like with the wrapping off of it? He said it looked like something like that. And I kind of made a joke. I said like the crypt keeper was in, and he goes, no, not like that, but it looked like somebody that was like a corpse, like they didn't look like somebody alive. It wasn't like a zombie. It was like a dried up corpse looking thing. He goes, and then I look again and there's not even a vehicle there. And he goes, and so I don't know what it was that ran me off the road. And he said that it was just he said at that point, he goes, he realized that maybe his mind was kind of like deteriorating, and so he felt like he was being harassed on a spiritual level that he was not able to cope, And so his girlfriend he was kind of seeing her, kind of dating her off and on. She talked him into going to a therapist. And when he tried to describe these things to her, she ended up referring him to someone else who gave him medication, which he took, and he said that he began to feel suicidal. And so he said, I decided to scrap that. I quit taking the pills. He goes, so nothing was really working. And so I asked him a simple question. I said, did you try Jesus? And he said at that point he was not religious. And I said, well, you don't have to be religious to believe in Christ. I'm not religious, and I believe in Christ. And he said, yeah, he goes, I did eventually. He's like, but at the time I just was not prepared. He goes, I just don't think I was spiritually like where I needed to be. And, he's like, it really took a slap to the face to really accept that I needed help from a spiritual standpoint, taking medication and doing all these other things, just wasn't working for me. And he goes, as a young child, he had accepted Christ, but he never really had a personal relationship with Christ because his mother was not really capable of taking care of him because of her condition. And then when his dad passed away when he was young, it just lended to him kind of being set adrift, and that's how he kind of fell in with these people. And so, he did say that anytime he tried to pray in this house that he was in, that something would happen to him. And at one point he was laying in his bed, and it was broad daylight. He said, I was trying to pray. It was in the morning. It was like 9 a.m. And he goes, and I never forget, he goes, something grabbed me by my ankles and started trying to pull me off the bed. And he goes, and I heard this growling noise, and I'm halfway off the bed, and whatever it was looming over me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, and I could smell like this sulfur mixed with rot. And he said that at that point, he was like, man, I got to get the hell out of this house. I got to get away from these people. These people are horrible people. I don't know what these people are, what they're into, what they're doing. He goes, I know that they were having they were doing sex magic, blood magic. He did say that he knew that they had sacrificed animals. And the most recent shenanigan was that they had claimed to have found a fairy mound a few miles away. And so they were out walking around in the field, a pasture for lack of a better term, and they found a glowing bluish-green circle, which they were convinced was a fairy mound, and that there was a big rock placed in the middle of it, a black stone, and that this woman, Stephanie, took that stone and took it and put it in their house. He said in the middle of the night, the first night that this rock was in their house, in the den, he said that he wakes up to boom, like this loud boom, and 5 of the windows in the house had blown outward. He said it was a nice, fall night. He goes, and it was cool up in those hills where he was living. And he's like, and dude, we wake up to this like booming explosion, and the windows had been blown out. And there were 3 people living in the house besides him. One guy who was supposedly the open relationship partner of the Jordanian girl. And then, Stephanie, his friend's former lover, whatever. And he said that at this point she had, for lack of a better term, I guess they had relations, him and her.
Yeah.
And he said that it was vile, to say the least, because he was not attracted to her. But he felt like she had kind of like tricked him, because somehow all of a sudden he was sexually attracted to her. And he goes, and I never was. And she's not a good looking woman, dude. He goes, she's very large and not attractive. And I'm not saying large women aren't attractive, but he said that she was like really obese and she would like not bathe regularly.
Yeah.
So she was just like, he goes, dude, I'm talking like, like a very, his words, greasy hair, like not clean. And he was just like, how am I doing this? And then on top of that, she had him paying, at this point, most of the rent, all the utilities. He was working every day. And then he was coming home to this 24/7 orgy party seances and Ouija boards and divination, all this other crap that they were doing. And they found what they believed was a fairy mound. He said that they told him to go out there and go with them to this fairy mound. Now, of course, in the last episode, we talked about how he had gone to the City of Night. We're going to get into that. He had said that he had gone into this place, the City of Night, on multiple occasions. The first time being where he had met his uncle there. He went there again, and very similar to what we had talked about on the show with Scorpion, which is a friend of ours, talking about being trapped inside of like a hotel or a house that was like made like an apartment complex, but it was like all these rooms that were connected. And he said that he ended up in this like rounded room where there were no doors, you couldn't get out of it, and they just kept walking around in circles. And there were these weird brown, for lack of a better term, elves, dark elves, and they had these really nasty, weird-looking black eyes, and they looked like they had these weird wrinkles under their eyes that almost looked like swirling patterns. And he said that they were basically just sitting there holding like these green stones, and they were, people were being, for lack of, I guess another, just drained. I don't know how to describe what he was describing to me other than to say they were taking energy from these people. He goes, and I just would wake up and I'd feel extremely exhausted, extremely tired. And the only thing I would remember is just being in this room, walking around in circles. And I said, that's very similar to what we've heard other people say. And then at one point he got out of there somehow, and he was walking down the street in this dark city. And these two beings that they were human-like, but they had wings. They came swooping down, and they tried with these bat-like wings, but they were just regular people with wings, and they tried to grab him and take him, and he woke up. And then, of course, he woke up falling back into his body. And then one night when he was outside smoking, he said he looked up, and he saw – now he was smoking, not just a cigarette,
The devil's lettuce.
Yeah, he was smoking the devil's lettuce, and he looked up, and he goes, and I see this winged gargoyle-looking thing sitting on the roof of our house. He's like, and this was not a hallucination. It was not no fleeting, quick glance. It wasn't like the goat-like thing that I saw running alongside my car. He goes, I look up, and there it is, just sitting there, like kneeled down. It had horns, like it just looked like the quintessential visage of the devil, and he goes, and I just look up and I see it. He goes, I see it looking right down at me. He goes, and I'm thinking like, what in the heck am I looking at? And this thing is not moving away. It's not like it's trying to hide from him. It is just right there. And so he said that he had this moment of clarity, I guess, that he had not had before or in a long time, let's put it that way. And he said that at that point I knew that I had to change my life and somehow free myself from this horror show that was going on every day. He goes, imagine coming home every day and there's some new nightmare going on. And it's just like a circus. And he said that, the one of the things that really like when I was listening to this guy talk, I'm not gonna lie, like I got like aggravated, dude. Like if it was me, like first of all, I wouldn't have been in that situation, but I would have just been like, these people, I don't know how much like he took way more. Like way more than anybody in this room would have taken. You know what I mean? Like I know how you guys are, and I know me, and I'm not gonna take somebody's crap like that, dude. You know what I mean? Like these people would have been like, I don't know, man. But he's a very, as he described himself, as a very passive person, at least at that time. He's a lot more assertive, as he says now. And he is living his life, very much in Christ. But at that time, he wasn't. And he was like, I'm sitting here looking at this thing, looking at me, and then it just flies off into the sky. And he's like, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I'm stoned, but this thing is there. It's really there. This is not a hallucination. There's a demon that was literally on the roof of our house, of this really nice ranch-style house. He goes, and then the owner lady that would come drop by every now and then, she would go to the back and like hang out with this self-proclaimed necromancing witch, and they were like maybe doing stuff together. And he didn't know, He goes, and I just felt like I was just there, like this passenger that was just there to pay for the ride. And he goes, and I just was getting really sick of it. He goes, and my girlfriend goes out there one night. He goes, and they tried to involve her in their sex magic. God. And at that point, he just was like, I'm like, no, I'm not, there's no more of this. We're not doing this. And he said that he literally got punched in the back of the head by one of the large guys that was there, kind of being, I guess, like as their security. And he goes, I go unconscious. He goes, wow. And now here's where he gets really messed up, like if it wasn't already. But he says, while I was unconscious, Jeff tells me, he goes, I end up being attacked by these little brown, elf-like beings. He goes, and they start biting me and tearing at my flesh. He goes, and then they grab me and they drag me to this hole that looks like this weird, like how they, like if you were to draw like a hole on a computer, like it's just kind of like rounded, like, it goes down, like a sinkhole.
Yeah.
I forgot how he tried to like describe it to me. Like I don't think he really could describe it correctly, but he's like, it's like a computer generated hole.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he goes and he gets taken down into it. He goes and he's like, I'm falling for what seems like an eternity. He's like, and the next thing you know, I'm in this dark place, and there's this like cavern, and everything is kind of like twinkling around me. There's like these stones all over the ground that are like blinking in different, patterns. And it's all like white, blue, red, whatever. And I said, oh, so the police came. I made a joke. And he was like, no, he goes, no, I wish. He goes, nothing was there to save me. He goes, and I look up and there's these steps, these big, long bunch of steps. He goes, and these things start kicking me in the back and pushing me. And I look up and I'm told to walk up these steps, but not, physically spoken. I just know that instinctively I have to go up these steps. And so I looked around, there's these little brown creatures around me. And then this one bigger one comes out, and he goes, and it was terrifying. And so I just pointed, so I did. I got up and I started walking up the steps. And when I get to the top, I realized that there's like this semicircle of these little elf-like beings. And one of them is kind of in the middle, and he seems to be the main guy. He said they were hideous. They had these really long, decrepit noses that kind of hung down past their lips. He goes, their teeth were like these weird, like long, sharp, teeth. They all kind of had this weird underbite. And he said that they had these big floppy ears with these points at the top of their ears, very elf-like, And the one creature began to talk to him, and Tony just showed me one of his claymation people that kind of looked like
kind of close.
Kind of looked like it, but the ears were pointy up and down. But good rendition. So anyway, he was talking to this what he said was like the leader. And so when I was listening to him talk, now immediately I was kind of like, okay, I know where you're at. At least I think I do. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I think I have an idea of what's going on here. And so this thing starts talking to him. And I said, it spoke English. He goes, no, but I understood it. And he said that it was saying that your friends have given you over to us as a sacrifice. But this being says, I don't want you, I want her. And he said, her. And he said, yes. He goes, I want her. She owes us a debt. Basically telling him, And he says, but in the meantime, if until the debt is paid, you're going to be here with us. Now, he says 1 minute he's getting punched in the back of the head. At least he felt something. At the time, he didn't really know what had struck him or what had happened, right? But he said that there was a pain in the back of his head, and he fell forward, lurched forward, and he fell flat on his face. He was already unconscious before he hit the ground. He goes, and he's like, I don't know exactly how I got there. And then he says, well, what am I doing here? And one of these beings told them, they said, one of your companions' friends struck you. But now you're here with us, and you're going to be here with us until we get what we want. And he asked them what it was that they wanted, and they said, you have in your possession a particular book. Well, here's the messed up thing. He was like, I don't have any book. And they said, yes, you do. It's in your closet.
Well, let me go so I can get it and go home.
Yeah, exactly. And so they said, go and get that book and then take it out to the mound, take the black stone back to the mound where it belongs. And then they told him very specific instructions to take that book and to burn it on the mound, on the black rock. And that he would sever his connection with them and that they would let him go. But there was a debt to be paid by her, not saying her name. So he wasn't real sure if it was the Jordanian girl or Stephanie, the proclaimed necromancers, whatever, or maybe it was even the owner of the property. So here's what ended up happening. So they told him, we're going to release you, but if you don't do what we ask, we're going to come and we're going to bring you back here, and you're going to live here in the earth with us for the rest of eternity. And he was like, okay. And he said when he looked around, he saw people that were like in various states of what looked like torture. And there were people that were chained to the walls and emaciated and looked decrepit. And some people looked like they were dead. And then there was like this, what looked like a pile of bones. And he goes, and he realized, this is real. This is no hallucination. I'm not in a dream. And so he said that just like that, this being snapped its fingers and he woke up and he was on the floor and he was like right there near the coffee table. And he got up and he realized that one of these guys that was friends with Stephanie had punched him in the back of the head. And so what these beings had told him was correct, that he had been struck. And so he got up and said, that's it, I'm leaving. And when he tried to walk past one of these guys, they shoved him and then tripped him and he fell on the ground. And then he got kicked in the ribs a couple times, and he looked up, and Stephanie and her friend were sitting there laughing at him while this was happening. And she was just like, yeah, go ahead, get out of here, whatever. So then when he tried to go to his room to get his stuff, they blocked his way. And they went in there and they grabbed some of his clothes and threw it out onto the floor and told him to take his clothes and get the F out, whatever. And that they were tired of him. They didn't want him there. And so he went back into town. He called the police and had the county sheriffs meet him out there. This is an interesting thing, too. When they went out there to meet him, he went to go get his clothes. He said, I need to go to my room to get some stuff. They told him, they told the police, whatever, to hold on while they're standing there in the hallway. And they went into his room and they were, I guess, going through his things. And he told them, no, don't let them do that. They're trying to take my stuff. So then the police went back there and said, what is it that you're taking out of his room? He wants to get his stuff. His name is on the lease. He wants to leave, And the girl, Stephanie, had put this something like wrapped in her black robe that she was always wearing. He goes, and he says, that's mine. Whatever that is in her hand, everything in that room is mine. She goes, no. This is mine. This is mine. And the police were like, well, then why is it in his room? Well, pretty sure that the reason that book was being kept in his room was so this book is said to be protected by these dark elves. Her being the person that she is probably was harassed by them, So she put the book in his closet so that he would have to deal with whatever these things. And now here's what happened. He says he remembers when they first got that book, he had gone to work and he had come home, and for nights on end, he was waking up in the middle of the night, between 3 and 4 o'clock every night, and he would see what looked like these dark, shadowy figures moving in and around his room. And at one point, he actually had something come out of his closet and tell him, like in no uncertain terms, give us this book or you die. And he doesn't even know what the hell these things are asking. Now, the thing is, when it spoke to him, he didn't know what this thing had said. So, he basically told his friend, who was, pretty well versed in several different languages that he knew from college. And he said, can you tell me what this means? And the person told him that it translated from Latin. So this being talked to him in Latin and told him, the book is ours, basically, telling him, you shouldn't have it, keep it and you die. So that's how it ended up being translated that way. In his mind, it was like he heard the language that it spoke, but it was telling him, give us the book or you die, because that's the thought that was put into his head. But specifically, it was like, yes, keep this book and something bad's going to happen to you. And so he didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So then he went to these people that he was living with and he said, look, if you have something that belongs to these entities, you need to give it back because they're not happy. So they basically laughed and told him to shut up and go away and whatever. And then he started to notice these weird beings that were standing out in the yard that looked different than these dark elf-looking creatures. And they were like small gnome-like creatures. Like he said, they were pale and they had like no eyes. It was just like these black holes where their eyes should have been. And when they would talk, their tongues would come out like real far. And so he goes outside and he goes, we had all taken mushrooms, like, these mushrooms they had harvested them out in the field. And he says, and I'd always been into taking hallucinogens. He goes, that was the one thing I didn't mind doing. And he says, so I took them, and that's when I saw these beings. He goes, the interesting thing was that several other people that were there tripping, as they call it, were seeing them too. So there's something that's really there. He goes, and then everybody started getting into a freaking panic because these creatures looked to be multiplying, and there was probably about a dozen, then about 24 of them, and they all ran toward the house and were running around inside the house, and everybody was like ducking and hiding and going into the rooms and trying to get away from them. And the next day he goes, I don't remember how it ended because I just passed out. I wake up and there's like bite marks all over my legs that look like small little chunks of flesh had been taken. He goes, and it happened to several of us, so we ended up having to go to the ER and like get treated for these, what looked like really bad insect bites that had been infected. He goes, and I even had one on my arm and my hand. And he goes, did we just have like a mass hallucination or what was that? Well, here's what I told him. Okay. I gave him this and I said, look, you went to a fairy mound with these people, that you took a black stone. And he goes, well, I didn't. I said, well, you were an accomplice, you were an accomplice to this. You disturbed these beings. You used that book, or your friends did, to find that because it glowed when the book was close to it. I said, so you basically had those beings on top of whatever these other beings were that are charged with protecting that book. So you already had whatever was in that house, which he said looked like a skeleton that wore a hood he would see kind of regularly. It was something that was already there. There was a female spirit that was there that would walk around looking like she had a burn mark around her neck and she would scream. He saw that one day when he came out of the shower. Several people had seen her. There was this boy that wore a hood on his head, right, that he saw on the Ouija board. I was like, the whole time you have these dark elves that are basically telling you that if you don't give them what they want, they're going to kill you. And then y'all go out and mess with a fairy colony. I said, does this sound about right?
Like he's caught in between all these different factions of like evil beings.
Yes.
Well, it's not like he's caught in between. It's more like he's going around slapping all of them. Armando used to have. Remember Armando saying, "What's his favorite saying?"
Oh, you're walking around like a 5-year-old blind kid or something.
Lost in the woods.
Lost in the woods, and that's how we're looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah, stumbling around. But that's exactly how. This is exactly what this guy is doing. He's stumbling around, just breaking everything, wandering into territories he doesn't understand, offending who knows what, and then they're all like, "Dude, just stop!" And like he's just not listening or ignoring. Or I don't think
he understood the gravity of what he was dealing with.
The Latin's part was, I think, understanding, but it's funny, like they're actively just trying to tell him, like, just give us the book, stop what you're doing, quit it, and
we'll leave you alone.
We'll leave you alone. And it's like just because of this stupid, well, I'm gonna be honest, stupid bitch. I mean, we're not allowed to cuss on here, but she has me infuriated. These two women.
It was pretty bad to listen to him talk about her. And subsequently, he did leave right after that last episode. The book was taken from her by the police. She swore up and down that it was hers. He claimed it. The police asked him, "Is it your book?" He said, "Yes." And they were all yelling and screaming, "No, it's not. It's our book. We use it," and all this stuff. And he's like, "Well, it's my book. I'm taking it." So what he did, which was pretty bold, he took the book. He wrapped it up in one of his pillowcases, took what he could and said, "You know what? I don't even want the rest of my stuff. They can keep it." He took everything he could that he needed. He left his bed, his dresser, everything. He just took his clothes and his watch and a few other things that he had.
Basically what you carry.
Yeah, and he got out of there. And so he went back out there with his girlfriend and his friend Steve and one of his friends from work, this guy that he knew from work. And they went out there and they walked around out into that area where he thought that mound was. He took the black stone. He had taken that with him too. And so he was getting calls and death threats from this girl and her friends talking about, "We're going to come to your friend's house. We're going to kill you. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." So they did the smart thing. They recorded them basically threatening them and turned it over to the police. So the police went out there and told them, "We got your threats. You saying you're going to do this and you're going to do that." And one of these girls actually tried to assault one of the police. So she got arrested, basically, as he called it, choke slam, WWE style. And I said, "Were you there?" He goes, "No, because I wish I could have seen it." He's like, "But apparently that's what happened." And so she got taken down and then put in jail or whatever because she tried to fight with the police. And these people had gotten to the point where they thought that they were above the law, basically. That's what it sounded like to me. And then he went back out there. He found the fairy mound because it was several miles away from the property. And so he did what he thought was right. He put the black stone back on the mound, and then he put the book on there, and they burned it. He said when they burned it, they heard screeching and howling noises and roaring and all kinds of, he said something that sounded like the cross between an elephant and a seal. Like he goes, "I can't tell you what it was. It was weird." He goes, and ultimately we heard human-like screams, and there was this green, like kind of a smoke that came off of it. And he said that was it. The book, he burned it to ashes. And after that, there was no more problems from his, end of the whatever. But it wasn't over for this girl. Apparently, she ended up getting arrested for drugs. They got raided. There was a bunch of drugs in the house. And she ended up going to jail for a while. When she got out, and this is really jacked up, I guess she moved to Oregon or something. So years go by, like 2 years, and he reconnects with his ex-girlfriend, Ashley, and they end up going with Steve to a rave. Now, this was not planned. It was just something that they all went and did, whatever. And it was a vampire festival, right? Because, unfortunately, his friend Steve was all into the supposed vampire scene, whatever, where they pretend to be vampires and all this stuff. And they run into this girl there in Portland at the rave. And she is with these 2 or 3 guys that he said, and we talked about this, that looked like they were not human. He said, dude, he goes, I believe I was in the presence of real, true vampires, like not human-like vampires. He goes, all 3 of them were like about 6'9", you know, in between like 6'8" and 6'9". They were really tall. They were all bald-headed. They had this weird-looking faces, and everybody was just like acting like it was normal for them to be there. And she was hanging out with them, and they were drinking out of this chalice, and she was all being super friendly with them and saying, oh, no hard feelings, you know. I know things went south, you know, and I was losing it. I was doing too many drugs or whatever. And she's like, here, have a drink. And so they offer him this drink, and when he goes to take a drink, he says, it's clearly blood. He's like, it was obvious that it was blood. He's like, I don't know if it was human blood or animal blood, but I could taste it. Immediately I spit it out. I was like, what the hell? And these beings were just staring at him while he was, you know, drinking this. And I asked him, I said, what were they wearing? He said they were all wearing like these cloaks. But a lot of people were wearing that there at this ball. So you don't know, you know, what if that's what
it's common vampire etiquette.
Yeah, everybody's wearing like this weird shit. So I mean, like, so he's just like, you know, he goes, I don't know what it is, but he said that these beings were sitting there and they were observing him. He says, and I look up and I see Stephanie's eyes, and they had changed into these like cat-like eyes or reptilian-looking eyes, and she was drinking blood. He goes, and she had fangs. And I was like, whoa, what the hell? And so he goes, I get up and I stumble away. He goes, and whatever was in that drink, I had ingested a little bit of it, and it obviously had some sort of like drugs or something in it. He's like, but I was like, you know, stumbling around and felt like I was going to go unconscious. And he goes, and there again, I go right there by the bathroom and I collapse. And he goes, the last thing I remember is my friends sitting there shaking me, trying to tell me, hey, are you okay? And then I'm unconscious. He's like, and then I end up back in this realm, this subterranean realm, right? And he encounters these beings once again, these elves, these dark elves. Some people who take DMT would call them the machine elves. Edgar Cayce talked about them when he would walk up the stairs going toward the light, and you know, and he would have these weird mutated, ugly, dwarf-like, brown-looking entities. And then as he got further and further up, they became more like beings of light, looking kind of like the same, but kind of like the difference between a goblin and an elf. You know, they looked more like light beings. You know, like they were made of like a purer energy or
like
something.
Less corrupted, basically.
Yeah, less corrupted. And so anyway, I'd read that before. And so he said, he goes, I'm surrounded by these dwarf-like elf-looking beings. He goes, and they're talking to me. And when they grabbed me by my arms and they drug me over to this table, and there again, I was confronted by this little committee or whatever. And they asked him 2 questions. They told him, we want her. Bring her to us. And he says, I can't do that. I just want to get away from her. And he says, look, we gave you another opportunity. So they gave him something. They put in his hand what he claims was this diamond-looking gemstone type thing. And they said, just give it to her. Give it to her. Put it on her, in her pocket, whatever you got to do. We want her here. She owes us, right? And so he said, okay. And then the second thing they told him was, it's you or her. So they gave him an ultimatum, right? This is 2 years. Nothing had gone on. Nothing had happened except one thing. One thing had happened. He said he saw this cat-like entity that it was floating in his hallway of his apartment. And he thought, what the hell? And so he looks over and he sees this cat-like entity sitting there arms crossed with its legs up like a human. And he goes, oh, I recognize that. And then he thought it, right? And this entity was like, yep, yeah, you remember me. And he's like, I'm looking at this thing, and he goes, it would have looked like a cartoon, if you see it in real life. It was weird. It was like a cartoon of like Felix the cat, but like demonic, And they basically told him, they're like, yeah, we've been watching you, and you did not do what we asked during our last conversation. And he said at that point in time, he remembered everything of the conversation. But when he had come back to our world, he didn't remember it all. So he told them, he pleaded his case, and he said, look, I didn't remember everything. I forgot something when I came back into this, until I came back to this world, I didn't remember it. I didn't know this. And so Jeff was telling me, he's like, I was very adamant. I told these beings, look, I don't remember this. And they said, well, you're going to remember it this time. And he said he took this like stick that had this like what looked like it was like a scepter, I guess, my words, but it had this like diamond looking thing on the top of it. And then he basically, crowned him upside the head with it. And he's like, you're going to remember it this time. And then he said that the court has spoken. Now, at this point, I told him, I said, what is happening to you is you're being visited. You're visiting the unseelie court. And he goes, what the hell is that? I said, that is the court of the fae. You ended up there. Somehow you offended them. You did whatever it was you did, probably entering into that situation with that mound, or you could have been taken there because of the protection of the book. Either way, you were in one of their courts. There's multiple. And I did tell him that. I said, I know this. I mean, I told him I don't mess with any of those things, because any of those interactions with those beings, there's always a price to pay. When the people from the Levant, the Middle East, when they say that that book is protected by elves, they're telling you the truth. You need to stay the hell away from it, because that's what, these people were playing with it and probably committed themselves to some sort of agreement with these beings. And so the bill was coming due. So I asked him, I said, what did you do? He said, dude, when I came to, he's like, I go to the bathroom. He goes, and I vomited. He's like, and I was sick from that. And some of that blood had gotten in my throat. I threw it up, whatever. And he said that when he looked up, one of these beings, these tall, beings that were in between, 6.5, 7 foot tall, whatever, was standing, had his hand out. And he turned, and he had that in his pocket. There was this little diamond, and he handed it to him, and they just closed his hand, and it turned around and walked off. He said about 2 weeks later that Stephanie had gone overseas, and I think he said it was in New Zealand, and she died in a car wreck. So that was pretty interesting. He said he never really confirmed it, but it was what his friend Sean had told him. His friend was like, hey, that girl that you used to live with, she died. He's like, I ran into her younger sister, and she passed away. She died in New Zealand. And so I was like, wow. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that whatever it was that he gave that guy, that thing, whatever the hell that thing was, that dude was there kind of like taking care of business, I guess, and gave it to her or did whatever it was that they were supposed to do. And of course she ended up being, deceased. And I said, since that happened, and he said it's been, like 15 years or whatever. I said, have you had anything else happen? He says, no. Pretty much nothing else has happened to me. He goes, I haven't seen or heard anything. He goes, I had a couple of weird dreams where I thought, this is weird, where he thought he was playing cards with a couple of these elf-like beings. And then that was it. And he goes, I don't know why we were playing cards, but they weren't being aggressive or anything at all. And he goes, but that was it. I never had any other, nothing. And then there was one other thing that happened to him. He said most recently, he's got children now and he's married. And he did go back and marry, the girl that he had met when he was in, whatever. And he said that one of his children had said that there was a woman that was coming to his bedside and trying to get him to go outside with her. And then he woke up to a woman's scream, and he went and he traced it back to his son's bedroom, his oldest son. When he asked his son, other than this, nothing else has happened. This was only like right after his son, his son's 4th birthday. And now his son's older now. But he said, I asked my son, I said, what does this woman look like? He began to describe Stephanie. And so...
Just never quits.
There you go. Yeah. And so when his girlfriend, who is actually friends with his ex-girlfriend too, in an ironic twist, his ex-girlfriend ended up marrying Steve. Like they started kind of talking and just kind of being like therapy to each other, because they survived this woman. Now, Stephanie's not her real name. I'm going to say that. But that's close to her name, and I just thought, we'll give her a pseudonym, whatever. The other woman, I don't even want to allude to her name or anything. I don't want to say it. She's a very evil woman, and I say this because she's, I guess, in charge of a very large coven up in Oregon, near the Oregon-Washington border, and supposedly she's still to this day practicing and doing things from that book. So I don't want any problems with those people. But, there again, I'm not afraid. I'm not going to sit up here and live my life in fear. I don't care. I mean, we have plenty of people who don't like us stand in line. But, that's pretty much it. I mean, so your thoughts?
Like, my mind goes all over the place trying to, like, make sense of what's going on here, because like what's funny about this is like he's like the messenger, like a passenger on like this dark tale of just
of woe
and he's just the passenger of it all, and like there's so much intrigue behind the scenes stuff that you just aren't going to know about, like that Blackstone, the deal, those vampires, what they had to do with anything. Like
if they were vampires,
I mean, but like in my head, this whole thing, like I can make a storyline that like would make it make sense to me, and I'd be like, okay, maybe it happened like A, B, C that led to D, and like this is why it ended up this way. But like I'm sure the truth is even crazier than anything I could come up with, because like it sounded like based on how it ended that the vampires are those weird 6ix9ine, people were either monitoring her or
she thought they were her friends.
Yeah, like they were watching her,
they
but
were
it sounds
probably
like
involved with
like mercenaries.
That's what I was thinking too.
Exactly, just like the Greys are very much like biomechanical mercenaries for the
there's like all these different
aliens.
There's all these different factions of demonic beings that are like interacting, making deals, trying to get like they're all trying to get what they want. So like they'll kind of work together, but not as friends. Just like as
it all intertwined.
just like as mercenaries. I want this. Well, what do I get out of it? You get this out of it.
You get this Blackstone. It's
like the relationships are transactionary.
Yeah, they don't really. It reminds me of. Do you remember that character E? From the story that Joel, the vampire from the temple, had given us. Now he talked about that being called E, and he said that thing looked like like a tall elf because of the ears. Mm-hmm. It had the pointy ears, and it looked like elf-like, and it told him not to go below where they were because down there was a lot of unstable phenomena.
Yeah.
And that they were at the core of all of that. I remember him saying something about some creature that was asleep that could eventually, like if it woke up, it could destroy the world. Like it was some kind of like elder god type thing or whatever. But down to that, there were all these different levels, and those beings, E's people, were the description kind of reminds me of those big tall beings, which would be something between like a dark elf and a vampire.
It reminds me of like Prometheus, whatever that kind of the engineer species.
Yeah, Well, yeah, because they're described the machine elves, you know, and that's why it's, you know, these dark elves of inner earth. And I do believe that he was taken to a court, an unseelie court, meaning the unclean, you know, fairy. Now, what they were as opposed to the dark elves, I don't know. I don't know which, you know, and they were offended by the transgressions or trespassing on their circle. But then you had these other beings that were looking for that book because you're going to be visited by them if you have that book. And it's not pleasant. These people, there are dumbasses online. I'm not lying. I've read some of the crap. They're like, oh, I would love to be visited by some other beings. Not when they're going to take you to basically their level of hell, you know, and it becomes Hellraiser. You're not going to be wanting to be visited by them. You opened the book, we came, you know, and then you're like, oh, I want to visit you. They're like, oh, I'm sure you do, dumbass. You know, I mean, these people, they're ignorant. They have no idea.
Isn't that what the Hellraiser movie is? Like,
yeah,
it's just movie over movie over movie of people, stupid people opening the dang box, and then Hellraiser coming out and be like, you're just going to die now.
And I think a lot of it is just, there's like this curiosity that's not worth the hassle. It's just like,
well, I think it's one aspect of curiosity, but like, you know, for Stephanie and her evil witch twin, they obviously, it was all power for them. Like, I mean, I think they recognized something and they just capitalized on it. And I think like that's why, like, it's even worse for him that he got tied in with these people, because I think like he got tied into some extremely deranged and like what is it, problem making, like even in the supernatural world. Like I think she just caused issues everywhere, wherever she went. And I think like for him to be caught in that means that he made enemies like unwillingly.
Yeah, he was really lucky to have made it out of that whole situation the whole time without having strong faith. He just dealt with one thing after another and lived to tell the tale and go on to live the rest of his life without being plagued by these things.
He got really blessed that those elves didn't like trick him or renegade or basically mess with him in any other way. Like they literally meant like, just give us her and you're good.
But you know, one thing I told him too, and this could be a big part of it, I think, he was saved when he was young. And he said he always believed in Christ and God. He never, you know, like his faith in God and Christ was never in question. He just wasn't practicing. But he said that the minute he got out of that house and was back, you know, away from it, he said he began to pray and pray and pray, and then even found a ministry that he started going to. And, you know, there was some deliverance. You know, they had to help him get clean, you know. And so I don't know. There was a whole lot of stuff that went on there. To me, it's a cautionary tale. Being passive is okay to a degree, but when people are doing things like that around you, you got to put your foot down and get the hell away from it.
Yeah.
I like to say you should never extend your boundaries into other people's space, but you should have boundaries. You know, it's important to have your own borders, but you should never, you know, go expanding your borders and trying to force other people to conform. But letting people run shock over you like that never is healthy for you.
Well, I guess that's it, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Paranormal Roundtable on a Tuesday night. From all of us here at PRT, myself, Tony, Anthony, Nelly, Scorp, everybody, my brother, good night.